My name is Kiara Hayes, and growing up, I was always the responsible daughter. The one who never asked for much, the one who quietly carried the weight of expectations without complaint. I watched my younger sister Alicia steal the spotlight. She was loud, reckless, and spoiled rotten. Everyone loved her like she was perfect, even though she was far from it. Our parents made it clear without ever saying it outright. I was low maintenance, which really meant invisible. I was the background, the helper, the one who stayed out of trouble and kept things running smoothly. But no one ever thanked me for the sacrifices I made, missing out on things, working extra hours, and swallowing the frustration of always coming second. At 23, I had a small apartment and 2 part-time jobs. Life was hard. Most nights I skipped. Dinner to make rent, balancing bills and exhaustion. I was proud of my independence, but the loneliness crept in quietly. I didn't want handouts or pity. I just wanted fairness. A little recognition for the hard work I put in. Watching Alicia cruise through life, dropping out of college without a care, going out every night, was a constant reminder of how different things were for me. She got every new thing, a fancy car, expensive clothes, lessons that I never even dreamed of. But I stayed silent. Because that's what I'd always been told to do. Be responsible, be strong, and don't make waves. What I didn't realize then was how deep the divide ran, how my quiet suffering was invisible to the people who should have seen me, and how that silence was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced. Just to say hi, maybe. Grab a cup of coffee. I wasn't prepared for what I overheard. My dad was on the phone, his voice warm and relaxed, talking to Alicia. "Don't worry about rent, honey. We've got it all covered. You just focus on your dreams." My heart froze. Dreams? Alicia? The same sister who'd dropped out of college, who didn't have a job, who spent more nights out partying than at home. Yet somehow, she didn't have to worry about paying bills. Meanwhile, I was scraping pennies just to buy groceries. I stood by the door, invisible in plain sight, listening to their easy promises. How was this fair? I'd worked so hard, struggled through every month, missed meals, skipped nights out, just to stay afloat. And they acted like I didn't exist. That day, the invisible line between us wasn't just blurred. It was burned away. Later, when I finally found the courage to ask my dad for a little help, just some groceries, a small bill to lighten the load, he looked right at me, his eyes hard and cold. "You're the independent one, Kiara. You don't need help." It was like a slap to the face. Years of sacrifice reduced to a single sentence. I wasn't a daughter in need. I was just supposed to be strong. Strong enough to do everything alone. The unfairness, the silence, the cold dismissal. It all piled up inside me like a storm waiting to break. I realized then I wasn't just invisible. I was forgotten. And no matter how much I gave, no one was watching. That night, alone in my tiny apartment, something inside me cracked. The weight of being overlooked, unheard and unseen, crushed down so hard I could barely breathe. I thought about all the years spent trying to be the good daughter, the one who did everything right. And for what? To be treated like a ghost in my own family? I sat on the floor, surrounded by silence that felt heavier than any argument or shout. No one asked how I was. No one noticed the exhaustion etched in my eyes. I was invisible, but it wasn't because I was quiet. It was because I was ignored. I thought about Alicia, laughing with my parents, carefree and spoiled. They were always worried about her, always ready to swoop in and fix things. But me? I was supposed to be tough, strong, independent, alone. That night, the pain turned into something else, a a quiet fury, simmering just beneath the surface. I packed a small bag, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I needed distance. Space from a family that didn't see me, that didn't care to try. I stopped answering calls. I skipped Thanksgiving. I let the silence grow between us like a wall I couldn't climb. They didn't know what I was becoming. They didn't know I was building my own path, one far from their favoritism and judgment. I was done playing the invisible daughter. Done waiting for them to see me. Because sometimes, the only way to be noticed is to walk away and prove your worth on your own terms. And that's exactly what I plan to do. The months that followed were the hardest and yet the most freeing I'd ever faced. Without the weight of their expectations, I started carving out my own life piece by piece. I worked harder than ever before, throwing every ounce of energy into the tech startup where I'd landed a job. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was fighting to thrive. I learned the language of the business world, mastering meetings and deadlines, often feeling out of place but refusing to back down. Every late night, every missed weekend with friends. It all built something I couldn't have dreamed of before. But what kept me going was the quiet voice inside that refused to accept how my family had treated me. The part of me that knew I deserved more than crumbs and cold shoulders. I didn't want their pity or their last-minute apologies. I wanted respect, recognition, a place where I wasn't invisible. It was a slow climb, with doubts creeping in like shadows. Was I good enough? Could I really leave the past behind? But each small win, getting promoted, earning stock options, being trusted with more responsibility, was a reminder that I was more than their judgment. I became the founding COO, a title I never expected but fought fiercely to earn. Suddenly, the girl who was told she was independent enough became someone with real power, financial freedom, a voice that demanded to be heard. Yet I kept quiet about it. No celebrations, no announcements. This was my victory, earned alone, far from their judgmental eyes. Still, the memory of those cold words from my dad, the dismissals, the favoritism, never fully left me. It fueled a fire deep inside. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was reclaiming my worth. And the story wasn't over yet. 2 years passed quietly, but then everything changed in a way I never saw coming. I was settled into my penthouse, the city lights sparkling below like the life I had fought so hard to build. Success was mine, but my heart remained guarded, stitched with the scars of neglect. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was my sister, Alicia. Her voice trembled, raw and broken. "Kiara, Dad's sick. We don't know what to do. The bills are piling up. Please come home." I stared at the screen, my breath caught somewhere between anger and disbelief. This was the same family that ignored my struggles, that left me to fight alone. The same people who told me I didn't need help when I asked for a little support. Now, suddenly, they needed me. I thought about all those years, the nights I skipped meals, the silent dinners, the empty promises from my parents. I thought about Alicia, who had been wrapped in their arms while I was left to figure things out by myself. Part of me wanted to turn the call off, to keep the distance I had fought so hard to create. But then, another part, quiet, vulnerable, softened, decided to visit, just once. When I arrived, Alicia was waiting at the door, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. The house smelled the same. The place where I'd always felt like a shadow, always second best. Every corner echoed with memories of being overlooked, unheard. I looked at them, the family who had hurt me without even realizing it, and felt the old wounds flare. But this time, I wasn't the scared girl anymore. I was someone who had survived, who had grown stronger in the silence. And as I stood there, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need their help. Standing in that familiar living room, I felt a rush of emotions, anger, hurt, but also an undeniable strength. Alicia's tears, my parents' worried glances, they all reminded me of the years I'd been invisible, the times I'd been overlooked and dismissed. I could see the weight of their struggles. But I wasn't the girl who needed rescuing anymore. I was the woman who had fought through silence and neglect to become someone they could never ignore. When Alicia reached out, her voice shaky, asking for forgiveness, I didn't rush to comfort her. I had forgiven in my heart long ago, but I needed to protect myself first. I looked around at the house that once felt like a cage, a place where my worth was questioned daily. Now it felt like a stage, and I was finally ready to take control. I told them quietly but firmly, I appreciate the call, but the past can't be erased with tears or pleas. I've built my life without you, and I'm not going back to being the responsible daughter who's expected to sacrifice everything. Their faces fell, shock mixed with a tinge of regret, but I stayed steady. This was my moment, the moment I chose me. I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to fix years of pain. Sometimes boundaries are what heal. I wasn't turning my back on family. I was setting a line that said I deserved respect, support, and kindness. And if they couldn't give that, I'd walk away. Because surviving wasn't enough anymore. I was ready to live, and on my own terms. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter. Not as the overlooked daughter, but as a woman who finally owned her power, and I wasn't looking back. After that visit, I knew things wouldn't be the same. And honestly, I didn't want them to be. I started building walls around my heart, not to shut people out, but to protect myself from the pain I'd endured for so long. I stopped answering calls when the conversations felt like guilt trips or reminders of the past. I stopped pretending I was okay when inside I still carried scars. But slowly, I began healing. The distance gave me space to breathe, to rediscover who I really was beneath the shadow of their expectations. I threw myself deeper into my work, using it as both armor and escape. Each day, the penthouse felt less like a lonely trophy and more like a sanctuary. I surrounded myself with people who saw me, not as the quiet, responsible daughter, but as a leader, a visionary. Still, some nights the silence would echo with memories. My dad's dismissive words, my mom's cold looks, Alicia's easy smile that once made me feel invisible. Those moments cut deep, but instead of breaking me, they forged something new. I realized my worth wasn't defined by their approval or neglect. I was more than the independent one or the golden child. I was a whole person with dreams, flaws, and strength. The past was a heavy chain I was finally breaking free from. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. What mattered was the woman I was becoming, the one who could stand tall without their validation. The phone might ring with apologies or pleas someday. Maybe I'd listen, maybe I wouldn't. But no matter what, I was done shrinking to fit their expectations, because for the first time in my life, I was living for me. Weeks later, when I least expected it, there was a knock at my penthouse door. I wasn't ready for visitors, not from them at least. I opened the door to find my father standing there, looking older, more fragile than I remembered. His eyes held something new regret, maybe even fear. "I'm sick, Kiara," he said quietly. "I don't have much time left, and I wanted to see you, to try and make things right." My heart tightened. Years of silence, the pain of being overlooked, the cold nights I spent wondering if I mattered, all rushed back. But I also felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't the little girl begging for love anymore. This was a woman who had faced her demons and found strength. I invited him in, not because I was ready to forgive everything, but because I understood that life is fragile, and sometimes closure matters. We talked, awkwardly at first. He explained his mistakes, admitted he favored Alicia, and wished he'd treated me differently. His voice cracked, his eyes filled with tears, but I didn't know if apologies were enough. Not yet. This visit wasn't about fixing the past. It was about facing it. I saw a man broken by time and regret, but I also saw a chance for peace. Maybe not for us to forget, but to acknowledge. I didn't promise to forget or forget the years I was unseen, but I promised to listen. That day, I learned that sometimes healing starts with simply opening the door. And while I wasn't ready to erase the past, I was ready to write a new chapter, with or without them. After that day, things didn't magically get better. My father's health continued to decline, and Alicia's tears came more frequently. They wanted me back, wanted forgiveness on their terms. But I had changed. I wasn't the desperate daughter who needed their approval anymore. I was someone who had found her voice through silence and her power through pain. When they asked for help, financial or emotional, I listened carefully but stayed firm. I told them the past wasn't erased by a few sorry words. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. My penthouse became my fortress. It was more than a place to live. It was a symbol of every sacrifice I'd made, every lonely night, every moment I chose to keep going. I helped where I could, but only with boundaries. No more being the invisible daughter who gave everything and got nothing in return. Sometimes I felt guilty, like I should be more forgiving, more open. But deep down, I knew self-respect wasn't selfish. One evening when my father was too weak to visit, Alicia called begging. "Please, Kiara, we need you." I stayed silent for a moment before replying. "I've been here all along, just not where you wanted me to be." That truth hung heavy. They had wanted a certain daughter, the perfect one, the one who faded into the background to make their lives easier. But I had become someone different, strong, independent, and unafraid to demand respect. I wasn't closing the door forever, but I was locking it on the past. This was my life now, and I was finally living it on my own terms. Months passed. My father's illness worsened, and the calls from my family slowed down. I knew the end was near, but I wasn't ready to return to the house where I had always felt invisible. One morning, I got a message from Alicia. It wasn't a plea this time. It was an invitation. "Dad wants to see you before it's too late." I hesitated. The old pain surged up like a tidal wave, but something inside me whispered that maybe this time I needed to say goodbye, not just to him, but to the past. I went. The house was quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. My father looked fragile, eyes filled with regret and love I never thought I'd see. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I failed you." I took his hand, feeling the weight of years between us. "I'm not angry anymore," I said softly. "I've lived my life on my own terms." He smiled weakly, and in that moment I understood that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment. I stayed by his side until the end, not because I owed them anything, but because I chose peace. Afterward, I returned to my penthouse, my sanctuary. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. I had built a life from silence and sacrifice, turned pain into power. The girl who was once invisible had become unstoppable. And now, the future was mine, unwritten, limitless, and finally free.